Hi, I'm Lacey. At my sister's wedding, my parents laughed at my fiancé, called him imaginary, said I made him up just to feel important. They even tried to keep me out of the family photo. But the moment that car pulled in, a Rolls-Royce, black as truth, everything changed. Still, the worst part wasn't the insult. It was the years before, the small silences, the backhanded jokes, the way they always made me feel like I had to earn space at my own table. Why did they need to erase me so badly? And what happens when you stop letting them? The Arizona sun hadn't even fully cleared the low rooftops when I pulled into the estate's driveway, rental car tires crunching against the gravel. It was Thursday morning, 2 days before the wedding, and everything around me felt too polished, like it had been edited before I arrived. People were already in motion, darting from tent to tent, clipboard in hand, earbuds in, smiles stretched just enough to look real. No one stopped to greet me. I stepped out, smoothing the front of my linen dress, and walked toward the main entrance where a huge floral arch wrapped around a wooden easel. It held a printed layout of the weekend: Friday welcome dinner, Saturday ceremony, Sunday farewell brunch, names and times neatly arranged in soft blush fonts. My eyes scanned quickly. Shannon, maid of honor, Claire. Bridesmaids, Naomi, Priya, Zoe. Family procession. Mom escorted by Uncle Brian. Nothing. No Lacey, not even a vague title like family guest speaker or readings. I wasn't just left out. I'd been edited out. I stood there for a long second, pretending to study the brunch menu printed next to the schedule. Inside, my stomach curled in the way it always did before I stepped into a room full of people who used to love me out loud. In the living room, cousins were unboxing coordinated floral robes, squealing about monograms and facials. I slipped in and smiled, but no one made space for me on the couch. Claire, the new maid of honor, gave me a hey that was just a tone higher than polite. Shannon floated in behind her, hair perfectly coiled, barefoot, holding a green juice. "Lacey, you made it," she said, giving me a side hug. "You're staying at the Airbnb, right?" "The one near the lake? Yeah, just got in this morning." "Oh, perfect. That one's so cute, very... you." I hesitated before asking, "Do I need to come in for a dress fitting?" Her eyes flicked to Claire, then back to me with a practiced smile. "Oh, I figured you'd prefer to just relax and enjoy the weekend. The bridesmaid stuff is kinda hectic, and I know you're not big on pastels." That was it. No warning. No, "Hey, hope you're okay with this." Just cut out, like a background character whose name got trimmed from the script last minute. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Sure, no problem." And that was the moment I knew I hadn't been overlooked. I'd been excluded on purpose. And the worst part? They'd all agreed it was best not to tell me. I kept it together through the morning bustle. By noon, I found myself sitting across from my mother at a small cafe table on the estate's back patio. Her hair was done, full face of makeup already melting slightly in the heat. "So, big weekend," I offered, carefully. Aileen took a delicate sip from her chamomile tea. "Shannon's done such a beautiful job. Everything is just so elegant. Did you see the seating charts? Her eye for design really came through." I waited for her to mention my name not being on that chart. She didn't. Not once. "I noticed I'm not in the ceremony," I said, pretending it was a neutral observation. She blinked, waved her hand. "Oh, you know how these things go. Too many moving parts. And with your schedule, we figured you'd rather not be roped into all the chaos. You know how you are, always needing your space." I wanted to say, "No, you decided I don't belong here. You decided for me." But I didn't. I stirred my iced tea instead, watching the lemon wedge spin. I'd fought so hard for autonomy in my life, my job, my city, my choices. And here I was, once again sitting in front of the same woman who only respected my distance when it suited her convenience. That afternoon, I returned to the Airbnb alone. Kendrick had a work call and wouldn't fly in until Friday night. The house was quiet, tucked between desert trails and hills that glowed gold as the sun dropped lower in the sky. I walked around the small backyard after dinner, barefoot on the stone tiles. A string of Edison bulbs buzzed above my head. The silence was the kind I used to crave. But that night, it felt hollow. Memories came fast, uninvited. Shannon at 16, begging me to do her makeup for prom, her asking me to write poems for her high school boyfriends, us dancing in pajamas to old Destiny's Child CDs, and now I wasn't even bridesmaid material. That realization didn't shatter me. It just settled in the center of my chest, slow and firm like something that had always been there, but only now revealed its full shape. I leaned against the railing and let the desert air pass through me. I didn't cry. I'd done all my crying years ago when I finally understood what kind of family I was born into, one that celebrated proximity, not authenticity. They didn't erase me by accident. They erased me because I made them uncomfortable, because I refused to shrink. That night, as I climbed into bed alone and scrolled through the group texts lighting up my phone, photos of pastel robes, selfies in the bridal suite, I made myself a silent promise. I wouldn't fight for space where I wasn't wanted, but I also wouldn't disappear. Morning arrived too fast. The sun was already heating up the patio tiles outside by the time I zipped up my dress and headed back to the estate for the family brunch. I didn't sleep much. My phone was full of wedding prep photos, pastel filters, toasts, champagne flutes clinking midair, but not a single one included me. Kendrick was in meetings across town. He'd land back in Scottsdale later that evening. I told him I'd be fine. At the brunch, the atmosphere felt curated. Coordinated floral centerpieces, perfectly folded cloth napkins, a customized sign that read, "Brunch with the Bride." I walked in and scanned the tables. Shannon and the bridal party were at the main family table near the front windows, laughing, sipping mimosas. My name card was nowhere near theirs. Instead, I found mine wedged between two distant cousins I barely remembered, one of whom was already deep in a conversation about fantasy football. I sat down and smiled politely, nodding through a story I wasn't part of. Out of habit, I reached for the pitcher of orange juice near the mimosa bar. As I poured, I overheard my mother's voice behind me, light, amused, not trying to be discreet. "She says he's in aviation," Aileen said. "But who even knows what that means anymore?" Judith responded, a bit louder. "I swear, at this point I think she just pulls pictures from Pinterest and says, 'That's him.'" They burst out laughing. I didn't turn around. I didn't confront them. My hand tightened around the glass stem just enough to steady it. I lifted it slowly and walked back to my table, careful not to spill anything. They were talking about Kendrick, about the man I had built a life with, the one who sent flowers to my mother on her birthday, even when she didn't reply, the one who respected the silences I didn't know how to fill with my family. And they reduced him to a punchline. Part of me wanted to believe they were just joking, that it wasn't personal. But the laughter said otherwise. It wasn't just casual mockery. It was targeted. It was meant to diminish, to chip away at what little space I'd carved out for myself in this tightly controlled narrative they'd all agreed on without me. A little while later, Shannon stood and clinked her fork against a glass. "Okay, everyone. Before we head to the spa, let's take some group shots for the wedding album." She gestured toward the staircase near the floral arch, where a photographer had already begun setting up. Everyone rose, buzzing with energy, shuffling toward the photo area. I followed, walking slowly behind them. Judith's voice again, this time aimed at Shannon. "You know, why don't we have Claire stand next to you instead of Lacey? It just makes more sense. Claire's getting married next, and she fits the palette better anyway." Shannon didn't flinch. "That's fine." No one disagreed, not even my mother. Claire smiled like it was a favor she hadn't asked for. I stood there for a moment, a few feet away from the forming group. A cousin called out, "Lacey, can you hold our phones?" So I did. That was my role now. The photographer didn't ask me to step in. He just clicked away as they posed. Shannon beaming in the center, flanked by her bridal entourage, all soft pink and curated grace. Claire next to her, hand resting lightly on Shannon's shoulder, like they'd been sisters all along. I smiled, because it's what you do. After the photo session, I made my way quietly toward the powder room down the hall. I closed the door and rested both hands on the sink's edge. The mirror was too clean, too honest. I stared at my own face, waiting for tears, but nothing came. My reflection looked calm, too calm. I reapplied my lipstick, blotted it with a tissue, fixed a strand of hair that had come loose. And then I stood there in silence, long enough to breathe, to decide. I would not ask why. I would not beg for space again. This wasn't an accident. It was strategy. Their silence wasn't clumsiness. It was choice. So I chose too. When I stepped back out, no one noticed I'd been gone. No one asked where I went, and I didn't offer. The sun had shifted across the estate, casting longer shadows on the ground. I walked back through the patio, past the mimosa table, past the chatter, past Judith's smug smile. I didn't stop. Let them keep their photos, their pastels, their curated brunch moments. I had something far less polished, but far more powerful: truth, and it was starting to sharpen inside me. After brunch, I didn't linger. I slipped out through the side patio, past the hibiscus hedge, and circled back toward the guest house where I was staying. My room was still cool and quiet, the curtains drawn just enough to soften the desert light pouring in. I kicked off my sandals and sat at the edge of the bed, hands resting on my knees. I stayed like that for a while, still, breathing. My body was present, but my thoughts were everywhere else. On the mimosa table, on my mother's laugh, on Claire's perfectly timed smile next to Shannon in that family photo. I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. Right now, I was just tired of pretending it didn't sting. By late afternoon, people had started drifting toward the backyard again. There were wine bottles popping, Bluetooth speakers buzzing with old-school R&B, and the faint smell of grilling shrimp skewers wafting through the open kitchen doors. Casual mingling, that's what Shannon called it. A wind-down night before Saturday's big event. I took my time changing. Nothing too flashy, just a navy blouse and jeans. Clean, minimal, forgettable. I didn't want to be noticed. I just didn't want to be erased. The backyard had been strung with lights. Cousins filled the beanbag chairs. Uncles smoked cigars in the far corner, and someone passed around a tray of sangria in mason jars like it was still summer break. I found a seat near the fire pit, nodding politely at the group already there. Shannon was off talking to a florist on speakerphone. My mother was nowhere in sight. Colby, my younger brother, was holding court as usual. Animated, loud, surrounded by people who fed off his energy. At 26, he still carried himself like a frat boy who'd never left orientation week. Someone made a comment about long-distance relationships, and Colby seized it. "You guys seen that photo of Lacey and her fiancé? I swear it looks AI-generated," he chuckled, shaking his head, like one of those stock images you use for pitch decks. A few people laughed, tight, uncomfortable laughs, the kind people give when they don't know whether it's safe to stay silent. I didn't laugh. I didn't even blink. I just stared into the fire, watching the flames distort. Brent was sitting 5 feet away and he didn't say a word. He didn't look at me. No one did. Colby's voice kept going, oblivious. I mean, I'm not saying he's fake. Just, I've never seen him. Ever. And we live in the same damn country. Andrea, an old family friend with too many cocktails in her, leaned in closer to me, her breath warm with cheap wine. "You know," she murmured, "I always figured you were more the independent forever type. Not judging. You just always had that vibe." I turned my head toward her, not saying a thing. Her smile wavered. "I just mean like, you never really needed anyone. That's all." It was meant to sound flattering, but it didn't. It felt like someone reaching into your ribcage and tapping on the one part you tried to keep untouched. I stood up without a word. Didn't excuse myself. Just walked away, through the laughter, past the firelight, down the stone path toward the main house. No one followed me. Inside, the hallway was dim. I slipped off my shoes again to quiet my steps, passing the framed family portraits lining the walls. Photos of Shannon at her college graduation, Colby in his football uniform, a family trip to Yosemite where my face was cut off by a shadow. I paused near the mirror in the hallway. My reflection stared back at me, worn but intact. I used to think I'd outgrown moments like this. That age would somehow soften the sting of being reduced to a side character in my own family. But pain doesn't disappear with time. It just finds smarter places to hide. A flicker of a memory surfaced. Shannon, age 10, wearing a paper tiara, holding a bouquet made of napkins. "You be the veil holder," she said, pushing a scarf into my hands. I was the backdrop to her fantasy even then. I leaned closer to the mirror. This face had been called dramatic, complicated, too intense, too closed off. Not soft enough, not compliant enough, not bride enough. I was tired of apologizing for existing in a way they couldn't mold. Back in my room, I changed into sleepwear and drew the curtains shut. The party was still going outside, but I'd already left that story behind. My silence wasn't surrender. It was preservation. Tomorrow, they'd shuffle me again, seat me wherever was most convenient, say things that sounded like compliments but weren't. But I wouldn't bend. I had already started building the kind of resilience they didn't recognize, the kind that didn't need their approval. The sun rose with all the drama my family seemed to save for themselves. Light poured in through the sheer curtains of my room, casting a golden blur across the sheets. It was the wedding day. Saturday. My sister's big day. And I was still just a name on the guest list, buried somewhere below the sponsors and gluten-free caterers. I got dressed slowly. No bridesmaids buzzing around. No last-minute makeup touch-ups. No laughter spilling from the hallway. Just me and the silence. The dress I chose was elegant. Slate blue, fitted at the waist, sleeves just long enough to look intentional. It was understated but solid, like armor that didn't shimmer. Outside, the venue was already alive. I could hear vendors shouting over one another, silverware clinking, distant music rehearsals fading in and out. When I arrived at the garden, the guests were gathering in clusters, plastic flutes of orange fizz in hand. The scent of peonies mixed with something sharper, probably my own resentment. Brent found me first. He smiled, a polite curve of the mouth, then leaned in. "You look nice," he said. "They're still finalizing the photo schedule. Shannon's with the planner." He didn't linger. A quick nod, then he was gone, folding himself back into the chaos. I walked past the bar and spotted it, the seating chart. A massive acrylic board with soft pink calligraphy. Tables were arranged in spirals, each one named after a place Shannon and Armin had visited together. Venice, Kyoto, Marrakesh. I scanned quickly. No Lacey at the family tables, not at Kyoto, not at Venice. It wasn't until I reached the lower right corner, near a column titled Overflow Guests, that I found it. Table 18, Lassie, a couple of cousins. An uncle who'd once fallen asleep mid-birthday toast. And someone named Eduardo, marked as +1 no meal pref. Table 18 was tucked near the fence line, across from the portable restroom trailers. A planner in a black headset caught my eye. "Hi, can I help you?" she chirped. I forced a smile. "Just checking if this is right." She looked at the board, then back at me. "Yep, table 18. It's a great spot. Lots of shade." I nodded and thanked her. Because that's what you do when they push you aside with a smile on their face. You don't scream. You don't flip the table. You inhale, nod, and take the insult like you were raised to. I walked to my table slowly, heels tapping against the flagstone. It really was near the edge, close enough to hear the restroom doors creak open and shut. I sat down and tried not to make eye contact with anyone. 10 minutes later, I was still alone at the table. That's when Sienna arrived. She was 21, maybe 22, all contour and crop tops. One of those cousins whose name barely made it onto the tree, but whose Instagram made her the star of every event. She flopped into the chair next to mine, drink already in hand. "Lacey, right? You look amazing." "Thanks." She leaned in, conspiratorial. "So, is he like your sugar daddy, or is it real? Either way, like, respect." I blinked. She grinned. "I mean, come on, you look so chill, and he's like, straight up James Bond energy." I set my glass down carefully. "He's the kind of man who shows up when it matters," I said flatly. Sienna blinked. "Okay," she said, dragging the syllables out like a child backing away from a firework. She spun her chair to another cousin and began gossiping about someone's bridesmaid shoes. Just like that, I became invisible again, but not before reclaiming the air between us. From my purse, my phone buzzed. Kendrick, parked around the corner. "Don't move." My fingers tightened around the device. I exhaled, a full, uninterrupted breath for the first time that morning. No tuxedos, no flower girls, no champagne toasts had made me feel grounded. But those 7 words? They anchored me. I placed the phone back into my clutch and straightened my shoulders. The planner was waving people toward the garden arch, calling for family rows to begin lining up. I didn't rush. I just stood there at table 18, behind the ferns and the filtered glances, waiting, not to make a scene, but for the moment they'd have no choice but to notice. I didn't need to check my phone again. He said he was 10 minutes away, and Kendrick had never once said something he didn't follow through on. So I waited, still, poised, as if the wedding music and flowery laughter around me weren't crushing in from all sides. They started herding guests toward the reception tent once the ceremony ended. The sun had dipped just enough to bathe everything in a soft orange glow. Picturesque, almost cinematic. But beneath the fairy lights and perfectly placed floral arches, I could feel something colder threading its way through. Not dread, not anger, just resolve. Inside, the reception hall was bright, polished, and loud. The tables were laid out in a grid around a small dance floor, the centerpieces rising like floral monuments to an illusion of unity. I found my seat again, still at table 18, still facing the back. It didn't matter. The DJ tapped the mic and announced it was time for toasts. First came Armin's best friend from med school, a charming, self-deprecating story about their residency years. Next was Shannon's college roommate, who opened with a joke about tequila and ended with a tearful, "You deserve the world." Then Brent stood up. He looked the part, confident, rehearsed, every word smooth as granite. He spoke about family, about love being partnership and laughter. He thanked Armin for welcoming him into the family. He toasted to growth. He didn't say my name once. I sat still, glass in hand, not surprised, just clarified. As Brent sat back down, the DJ turned slightly to the right, scanning the crowd. A server, maybe acting on someone else's cue, or maybe just improvising, walked toward me and held out the mic. I didn't plan this, but I took it. I stood slowly, heels scraping the wooden floor just enough to draw a few heads. I cleared my throat and looked out at a sea of faces that didn't expect me to speak. "I won't keep you long," I said, voice steady. "It's a beautiful thing, watching two people celebrated so fully, so loudly, so freely." I paused. Not everyone gets that. Some people move through rooms where they're barely acknowledged, let alone celebrated. So, if you do get it, if you're lucky enough to be seen and heard and held in that kind of light, don't take it for granted. Silence. Not pin drop, not awkward, just held. Then the mic chirped, a soft pop, and I handed it back. I returned to my seat. Brent caught my eyes across the floor, briefly, and then he looked down. Just like that. That was the confirmation I didn't know I still needed. Brent wasn't silent because he didn't want to take sides. He was silent because it cost him nothing to let me take the hits. I sat back, feeling calm. Not triumphant. Not shaken. Just settled. Aileen's eyes flicked toward me for the briefest moment, then dropped to her napkin. Shannon was already sipping her champagne, chatting with someone across the table, like I hadn't just unwrapped every layer of their curated reality with 3 sentences and a pause. No one said anything to me, no one clapped. But they all heard it, and for once, I didn't feel like I had to follow it up. I didn't need to apologize for the way I shifted the air. I didn't need to soften the blow. Sometimes the sharpest thing you can do is be unmovable in the exact moment they expect you to shrink. The music picked back up. People returned to their plates, the clinking of glasses smoothing over the friction like icing over cracked porcelain. But the cracks were there, and I had no intention of gluing anything back together. The sound didn't crash in. It didn't scream or demand. It slid into the air like a slow wave, low and deliberate, curling at the edges of the music and chatter, just enough to turn heads, just enough to cut conversations in half and freeze forks halfway to lips. It wasn't feedback from the mic, and it wasn't the clatter of a spilled champagne glass. No one could pretend it was normal, because it wasn't. It was the purr of an engine that didn't belong. Not here, not in this curated, pastel-draped backyard wedding reception. A noise so polished, so out of sync with the hum of laughter and clink of cutlery, it felt like a warning. I didn't even need to look. The black Rolls-Royce glided up the estate's winding driveway like it had a deed to the place. Sleek and glassy, unapologetically pristine. It wasn't here for attention. It commanded attention. It passed under the balloon arch at the edge of the reception without flinching, its matte chrome trim catching the last of the sun as if it had arrived on cue. When it stopped, the air shifted, the doors opened with a quiet finality, and then he stepped out. Kendrick didn't rush. He didn't even glance around. He exited the car like he was stepping onto a stage he'd seen 1,000 times before. The tailored charcoal suit hugged his frame with surgical precision. No tie. Crisp white shirt unbuttoned just enough to hint at something sharper beneath the surface. Sunglasses still on, even as the sky dipped into gold and mauve. People stopped mid-sentence, mid-drink. Aileen, my mother, clutched her wineglass tighter. Brent's jaw tensed. My sister Shannon, in all her Pinterest glory, paused just long enough for the mask to slip. 1 second of stillness, enough to betray the nerves she'd tried to bury under blush makeup and borrowed diamonds. Kendrick walked past the gift table, past the hand-painted "Welcome to Forever" sign, past the photographers, past rows of white folding chairs dotted with sorority sisters in matching floral dresses. He didn't ask where to go. He didn't scan the crowd. He walked with purpose, with history, straight toward me. I didn't get up. I didn't plaster on a smile or pretend this was a coincidence. I just watched him move, slow and certain, like a man who already knew what was waiting for him. "Did I miss the toast?" he asked, leaning in just enough to brush a kiss against my temple. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. He sat beside me, one hand steady on the table, the other reaching for the water glass like he had all the time in the world. We stayed like that, still and silent, while the rest of the reception awkwardly resumed around us. Muffled chatter, an unsure laugh, a waiter pretending not to stare. Then Kendrick pulled his phone from his inner pocket, unlocked it, scrolled. "I wasn't snooping," he said. The planner left her iPad open. I saw a message. I didn't move. "It was from your mom, to Shannon." His voice, still low, dropped in temperature. She said, and I quote, "Don't let Lacey near the mic. Let someone else speak first and cut it if she insists." My throat went dry, but I said nothing. Kendrick wasn't just delivering news. He was delivering proof. "They didn't forget you," he said. "They made sure no one heard you." That hit harder than anything. I'd spent months gaslighting myself, wondering if maybe I was too sensitive, too reactive, too much. Kendrick had always played it cool, told me not to assume the worst. Not anymore. He looked at me, and I met his eyes. Not hurt, not broken, just clear. Ready. "All this time," he said, "I thought you were exaggerating. I thought maybe they were just careless. But this was deliberate." I nodded once, the smallest gesture. Not for him, just to steady myself. Then he stood. "I'm going to make my rounds," he said, smoothing the edge of his jacket. "Join me when you're ready." I watched him walk, straight-backed and calm, into the heart of the party. He approached Aileen first, and I saw the color drain from her face. "Aileen," he said, offering a smile that wasn't quite warm. "What a beautifully executed event." She mumbled something about hydrangeas and vendor delays. Kendrick nodded, as if he cared. Then came Shannon. Her smile faltered. Kendrick extended a hand, gracious and cold. "Congratulations. Wishing you and Brent exactly the future you've earned." Brent moved to shake his hand, and Kendrick didn't take it. The silence that followed was surgical. You could feel the air ripple. The guests noticed. Heads turned. Whispers started, hesitant at first, then sharper. People glanced back at me, still seated at the edge of the lawn. No mic, no spotlight. Just me, watching everything fall into place. But something had shifted. I wasn't invisible anymore. The whisper they thought they buried had walked in on 4 wheels and left the doors wide open. No more pretending, no more shrinking, no more waiting for someone to hand me a voice. I had one. And I had Kendrick, who'd made sure everyone remembered it. And now, for the first time all day, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The laughter didn't sound like joy. It was the kind of laugh that curled at the edges, tight, rehearsed, too synchronized. It came from the back right corner of the reception tent, where the lights were dimmer and the wine glasses were fuller. I was halfway through a bite of cake when I caught the sound of my own voice. At first, it didn't register, just a faint audio clip, muffled under giggles and clinking silverware. But then I heard the words clearly. Me, 19 years old, speaking nervously at a college panel. I recognized the speech. I recognized the tremor in my voice. I remembered how proud I was to get up there that night, and now they were playing it like a blooper reel. I turned in my seat. A semicircle of women, Judith, two of my cousins, an aunt I barely spoke to, were gathered around a phone. One of them, mouth wide open in laughter, nudged the other. Judith wiped the corner of her eye dramatically. And she wanted to be a motivational speaker? Another chimed in. Poor thing, she sounded like she was about to pass out. I stood slowly, carrying my plate with me as if it were a shield. I walked over, pretending to refill my drink at the water station just beside them. That's when I saw the screen. Someone had dug up an old YouTube clip and shared it to the family group chat. It now had a laughing emoji reaction from my mother. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Their laughter spoke loud enough. I returned to my seat in silence. And that's when Claire started talking. Claire, the cousin with 2 degrees, a dermatologist husband, and a curated life on Instagram that practically begged for a sponsored deal, was sitting close enough for her words to land. My sister just got accepted into the fellowship at Mount Sinai, she said. And did you hear Becky opened her second clinic? There were murmurs of approval, raised glasses, fake surprise. Brent clapped. That's amazing. This family really does have something in the water. Shannon beamed, her arm linked through his like they were in a campaign photo. Then someone, not even sure who, maybe another aunt, chimed in. Well, I guess every family has one creative type. You know, the one with the Instagram ads and the independent projects. The table chuckled. No one even looked at me as they said it. Kendrick did. He was standing off to the side, hands in his pockets, watching. He didn't interrupt. He didn't storm over or call anyone out. He just locked eyes with me and waited for my cue. But I didn't give it. Because I wanted the performance to continue. I wanted every mask to drop, every role to be played. I needed them to show themselves in full daylight, without me having to say a thing. Another laugh shot across the table. That was enough. I folded my napkin slowly, set it beside my untouched dessert, and stood. My chair didn't scrape. My steps didn't rush. I didn't slam anything. I didn't excuse myself. I just left. Their laughter stumbled behind me like a wave breaking too late. A few glances followed. No one called out. Outside, the air had cooled. The string lights twinkled in the garden, still set up from the ceremony. I walked past the hedge archway and toward the lawn, the hem of my dress brushing dew-covered grass. It didn't matter what they said inside. Not anymore. I knew what they were doing. One last try to shrink me before the night ended. One last test to see if I'd fold. But I didn't. Not this time. I stood by the edge of the garden, heels sinking softly into the earth, and let the silence wash over me. I could still hear muffled music from the reception, voices raised in cheer, a new toast beginning. Let them have it. They'd spent years trying to edit me out of their picture, sculpt me into something quieter, prettier, more manageable. And I'd spent years trying to play along. But not tonight. Not ever again. The first snowfall had melted off the New York sidewalks by the time I stepped out of the car. Midtown bustled like it always did. Business suits, coffee cups, tired mothers, urgent strides. But tonight, all that noise faded behind the revolving doors of the Barclay Hotel, where a black and gold banner bore my name. Lacey Fowler, branding in the age of voice 2 weeks. That's all it had been since Arizona, but it felt like an entire lifetime had shifted in those 14 days. In the mirror of the hotel restroom, I looked at the reflection of a woman in a tailored white suit, heels grounded, eyes focused. I didn't check to see if my parents had arrived. They had received their invitation like everyone else, on thick cardstock, embossed in matte ink. You once asked if I was serious, the note had read. I'd like to show you what serious looks like. It wasn't a plea. It was a calendar entry. Their attendance wasn't needed, but I knew they'd come, not for me, for the need to verify if I'd really become the person I claimed to be. The ballroom shimmered under chandeliers as I walked up the side aisle. Kendrick was already near the stage, talking quietly to the AV team. He looked up, gave a short nod. I didn't need more. Rows of chairs were filled. Colleagues, clients, People who had seen my work online and flown out to hear my voice in person. My voice. Not an apology. Not a plea for inclusion. Just presence. And then, in the front row, Aileen and Melvin. My mother's lips were pursed, her expression unreadable. My father wore his gray blazer that he always saved for events with potential. Neither of them smiled, but they didn't look away. That was enough. I stepped onto the stage. The mic was already live, the lights warm but not blinding. "Good evening," I said, calm and deliberate. "I want to talk to you about building something when no one believes you can. I want to talk about starting from a place of invisibility and making that the very reason people can't forget you." I didn't mention Arizona. I didn't speak of my family. But every syllable was a quiet excavation of everything I hadn't been allowed to say for years. People leaned forward, phones came out, notes were taken. But I kept my gaze above them, above the rows, above the noise. I wasn't speaking for approval anymore. When the applause came, it wasn't deafening. It was deep, affirming, the kind that stayed with you long after the room emptied. Later, on the rooftop, the air turned cool and sharp. Aileen approached Kendrick first. "Thank you," she said, tone clipped, "for believing in her when we didn't." He tilted his head, expression unreadable. "She never needed belief," he said. "Just space." A pause. My mother looked at me, opened her mouth, then closed it again. She didn't apologize. And I didn't need her to. I just nodded, then turned away to greet someone from a brand agency who wanted to set up a meeting. At the end of the evening, as the last servers cleared empty flutes and half-eaten desserts, Melvin approached. His voice was low. "You've built something. I didn't see it before." I met his eyes. "No one did," I said. He didn't push, just nodded and walked off, jacket draped over his arm. And that was it. No grand reconciliation, no tears, no embrace. But in that moment, I realized my win didn't need an audience. It didn't need validation from the people who had once dismissed me. The point was never revenge. It was freedom. Freedom from shrinking, from needing to be smaller to fit someone else's version of a daughter. I stood alone on the rooftop, the city below glowing like a promise I'd finally kept to myself. The first time I watched the sea from our balcony in Dubai, it was silent. Not just outside, but inside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't performing resilience. I was living it. It was late evening. The sky was cotton soft, blending lavender with deep coral, and the wind carried hints of salt and jasmine. I was barefoot, watering the herbs on the ledge, basil, mint, and a stubborn rosemary bush that refused to die no matter how many times I forgot it. Behind me, Kendrick was uncorking a bottle of red on the outdoor table. He set out 2 glasses, the clink barely rising above the hum of city lights below. "Funny how far you can travel just by stepping out of their version of your life," I murmured, not looking back. Kendrick didn't reply. He didn't need to. We didn't talk about Scottsdale anymore. Not in the way people relive wounds. If it came up, it was clinical, like referencing an old surgery scar. There was pain here once, we might say, but never again with apology. My phone buzzed inside. I left the watering can half full and walked in. The family group chat was still active. It had been unusually quiet since New York, but that night a message popped up. Aileen had shared a photo, me and Kendrick from the summit stage, the banner behind us crisp and clean. The caption read, "Look who made it into the family album." No exclamation marks, no emoji, but also no passive aggression, just inclusion. Seconds later, a friend request from Judith appeared on Facebook. I stared at it for a moment, not long enough to overthink. I didn't accept. I didn't decline. I let it sit. That was the difference now. I didn't have to respond to everything to feel whole. A knock at the door broke the moment. Kendrick answered. It was a courier, white-gloved, holding a padded envelope. Inside was Shannon's wedding album. I opened it slowly, flipping past spreads of bouquets, table settings, candid laughter frozen in time. I was in one photo, far in the background, blurred, no caption, no name. I closed the book and placed it on the bottom shelf of our living room bookcase, not out of spite, just so it could collect dust next to the cookbooks we never touched. Kendrick joined me out on the rooftop again, wine in hand. I think, I said slowly, That I'm finally done measuring what they didn't give me. He raised his glass. That's because you started measuring what you gave yourself. The moon was brighter than the stars that night. It hovered like a quiet witness over everything we'd left behind. They may never say sorry, I whispered. You didn't need it, Kendrick said. Not a question, just truth. I leaned into him, not because I was tired, not because I needed holding, but because we were finally standing on solid ground, together. The city pulsed below. The wind cooled the edges of my skin. I didn't crave applause. I didn't need the last word. I had made peace with the echo. And this wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. There was a time I honestly believed that if I just worked hard enough at being agreeable, if I smiled when it hurt, kept quiet when I wanted to scream, made myself smaller every time I entered the room, then maybe, just maybe, they'd finally make space for me. Let me in. Let me belong. But here's what I've learned the hard way. You don't need to keep trying to earn a place in a room that was designed to erase you. You don't need to fold yourself into a version they'll accept. Some spaces were never built for your voice, and that's not your failure. That's their limitation. You have the power to build something better, to take up space, to be loud, bold, clear, to write your own story, not wait around hoping to be written into someone else's version of it. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, or like every room you step into expects you to shrink just to keep the peace, this is for you. Stop apologizing for existing. You don't have to be palatable to be valid. You don't have to make yourself small to be accepted. You are not a footnote. You're the whole story. And your voice? It's not too much. It's exactly right. So if this story hit home, if it made you feel seen even for a second, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're tuning in from. I want to know who's out there because I know I'm not the only one who's been through this. And if this story rubbed you the wrong way, if it challenged you or made you uncomfortable, I'm not here to argue. I'm here to talk. Let's open up that conversation. And if you want more stories like this, real, unfiltered, no makeup on the truth, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. This space, it's for us. It's for the people rewriting the rules. You matter. Your voice matters. Your story isn't over. It's just getting started. See you in the next one.
The room was quiet except for my baby's cries. Suddenly, I felt someone pull my hair hard. Before I could react, my husband Elijah yanked my head back and slapped me across the face. Pain shot through my cheek, and tears filled my eyes. I tried to keep my balance while holding my baby close to protect him. My heart raced with fear and disbelief. "This is for your own good, Mary," Elijah said coldly. I couldn't understand how things had gone so wrong so quickly. "Hi, I'm Kelly, and I'm 33 years old. I recently became a mother for the first time. It's been exciting but also really hard. I'm learning how to take care of my newborn and manage everything else at home." Those first days with my baby boy were full of joy, but they were also exhausting. I knew having a baby would change things, but I didn't realize how tough it would be to recover from childbirth while also managing the house. At home, things were a mess. The laundry was piling up, and dishes stayed in the sink longer than I liked. I barely had time for myself because I was always busy with my baby's needs. One afternoon, while I was trying to calm him, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I was surprised to see my mother-in-law, Natalie, standing there. She walked into the living room, and I saw her looking around at the clutter. Baby toys scattered on the floor, unwashed dishes in the kitchen. It wasn't how I wanted her to see our home, but I hadn't had time to clean. Natalie looked at me, and I could see a mix of worry and judgment in her eyes. "I thought I'd come by to check on you," Natalie said, stepping carefully over a toy. "Richard mentioned you might need some help." "Thanks, Natalie," I replied, feeling a mix of relief and embarrassment. I tried to sound calm as I replied, even though I felt overwhelmed. "Things are a bit crazy right now, but we're managing." Natalie didn't look convinced. She walked into the kitchen, and the sound of unwashed dishes clinking made me feel embarrassed. "Looks like you need more than a little help," she said sharply. "This place is a mess. Is this how you plan to raise my grandsons?" Her words hit me hard, and I felt a mix of frustration, sadness, and stress all at once. I'd been doing my best to keep up with everything, but in that moment, it felt like nothing I did was enough. "I'm doing the best I can," I said, holding my baby closer as if to shield myself from her judgment. Natalie sighed, clearly unimpressed. "Kelly, being a mother is about setting priorities. Right now, it doesn't look like you're prioritizing anything properly." Before I could respond, my husband Richard walked into the room. He quickly sensed the tension and tried to diffuse it. "Mom, Kelly is doing an amazing job," he said, defending me. "It's been tough, especially with the baby not sleeping well." But Natalie wasn't ready to let it go. She turned to Richard with a serious look. "You need to help her understand what's important. It's not just about cleaning, it's about being responsible. She's not living up to the family standards." I could see Richard was caught in the middle. He glanced at me and then at his mother, unsure of what to say. "Mom, let's not do this right now. Kelly is still recovering." Natalie cut him off. "That's exactly why discipline is important. If she learns to manage things now, she'll be better off later. You can't go easy on her, Richard." I was stunned when Richard hesitated and then finally said, "Maybe you're right, Mom. Maybe Kelly does need to learn the hard way." Hearing those words from my husband felt like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe he would side with his mother, especially after seeing how hard I was trying. Natalie gave a firm nod, as if she'd won. She pushed Richard toward me, saying, "Show her that this kind of behavior can't be tolerated." In that moment, I felt completely shattered. I felt completely overwhelmed. It wasn't just the tiredness or the mess in the house. It was the feeling of being judged and misunderstood by the very people who were supposed to support me. Being a new mom was already hard, and I was doing my best, but it felt like nothing was good enough for Natalie. That day, I realized how much it matters to have people who truly understand what new mothers go through. It's not just about having a clean house or meeting family expectations. It's about doing your best, even when it feels impossible, and having others who lift you up instead of tearing you down. Before I could process it all, Richard grabbed my hair roughly, pulling me toward him. He slapped me hard across the face. The sound was loud, shocking, and unforgettable. It was a moment that crossed a line I never thought he would. I clutched our baby boy tightly as he cried, his sobs mixing with the pounding of my heart. "Richard, what are you doing?" I asked through my tears. The slap hurt, but the pain of betrayal was worse. I couldn't believe this was happening. "This is for your own good, Kelly," Richard said, his voice cold and emotionless. He wouldn't even look me in the eye. "You need to learn." The room went silent except for our baby's soft cries. Richard looked at me briefly, his face showing frustration and maybe some embarrassment, but there was no apology. Natalie stood there, her expression stern. She didn't say a word or even move. It was like she expected this to happen, and her presence made it all worse. What was supposed to be a visit to help me turned into something else entirely. Instead of support, I got judgment. And now this, a slap that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. As Natalie got ready to leave, she whispered something to Richard at the door. I couldn't hear all of it, but her smug look and Richard's troubled face told me it wasn't anything kind. The coldness in the air felt unbearable, making my heart sink even deeper. That night, after all the chaos of the day, I felt more broken than ever. I rocked my son to sleep, trying to comfort both him and myself, but the fear and dread wouldn't go away. What was supposed to be a loving family now felt like something else entirely. It felt like I was being judged, like I was constantly failing in their eyes. As I held my son close, I made a decision. I had to leave. Not just for my safety, but for his too. The house that once felt like a home now felt like a prison, built by the very people who were supposed to love and protect us. Richard had crossed a line, and I couldn't trust him anymore. With Natalie's influence always in the background, it was clear this wasn't a safe place to raise my son. That night, I couldn't bear to sleep next to Richard. Instead, I took my baby to the nursery, a small room that had become my safe space in the past few weeks. Sitting in the rocking chair, holding my son, I replayed the day's events over and over in my mind. Each time, The pain and betrayal felt deeper. I knew I couldn't stay. The next morning, while Richard was at work and Natalie was gone, I made a call to Teresa, a close friend who had offered to help me before. She answered quickly. "Jennifer, it's me. I need the help you offered," I said, my voice shaking with fear and determination. "Say no more, Kelly. I'll come by today with my truck. We can move your things to my place until you figure out your next steps," Teresa said, her voice calm and reassuring. We came up with a simple but risky plan. During the day, I would pack just the essentials for my son and me. Teresa would come in the evening, and we'd quietly move everything out before Richard came home. I couldn't face him again, not after what had happened. I couldn't risk him or Natalie finding out what I was planning. As I packed, my heart raced, but I knew it was the right thing to do. This wasn't just about me. I had to protect my son. He deserved a safe, loving environment. I couldn't let him grow up in a house where violence and control were considered normal. Leaving was hard, but staying would have been harder. This was the start of a new chapter for us, a chapter where I could finally breathe and my son could grow up in peace. I stood there thinking about what would happen if I faced Richard again. He might try to apologize, or worse, Natalie might convince him to keep controlling me. I couldn't let that happen. I knew I had to leave. All day, as I packed my things, every baby outfit and toy felt heavier with memories. I kept thinking about the life I had dreamed of, the family I wanted to build with Richard. But the memory of Richard's slap and Natalie's cold, judgmental eyes reminded me that staying wasn't an option anymore. By late afternoon, most of my things were packed into boxes. I hid them in the garage, trying to stay calm and focused. Just as the sun began to set, Teresa, my best friend, arrived. Seeing her felt like a small light in the middle of the hardest day of my life. "Are you ready?" Teresa asked as she stepped inside, looking at the boxes and bags scattered around. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, holding my baby boy a little tighter. I had to do this, for him, for both of us. We worked quickly, loading everything into her truck. We didn't talk much, but we worked as if we had done this 100 times before. The last room I packed was the nursery. It had been my safe place, the only spot in the house where I felt a little peace. I took one last look around, whispering a quiet goodbye to the life I had once hoped for. But I knew now that dream was over. As we drove away, I watched the house fade in the rearview mirror. A chapter in my life was closing. My heart felt heavy, but deep down, I felt a small flicker of hope. My baby slept peacefully in his car seat, unaware of the big change, but I knew he was safe. This was the start of a new life, a life where fear and control no longer had a hold over us. When we arrived at Teresa's house, I felt a wave of relief. Her home was warm and safe, so different from the oppressive feeling of my old house. Being there made me even more determined to make sure Richard and Natalie could never hurt us again. I realized that leaving wasn't enough. I needed to protect myself and my son and make sure they couldn't twist the story or hurt anyone else the way they had hurt me. I started by reaching out to family and friends, pretending to be okay, while quietly planning the next steps of our new life. I just wanted to check in and reconnect with people. During these conversations, I paid close attention and quietly collected bits of information about Natalie's controlling behavior and how Richard seemed to blindly follow her. Some people hesitated to talk, but many didn't realize just how much influence Natalie had. Over time, I started gathering evidence, text messages, voicemails, and even recorded phone calls that revealed what was really going on behind closed doors. The most shocking piece of evidence came when I managed to record a video of Natalie coaching Richard on how to control me. Her words made it clear this wasn't about care or love, it was about power and control. Once I had enough evidence, I decided it was time to confront them. I chose a family gathering at Richard's sister's house. It was a neutral location with many family members present, some of whom had already hinted they were uncomfortable with Natalie's dominance. I hoped this would be the right time and place to reveal the truth. On the day of the gathering, I was nervous. My hands trembled and my heart raced, but I knew I had to do this. Teresa came with me for support, her presence giving me the courage I needed. As I walked into the room, I could feel the tension. People greeted me quietly, and it was clear they sensed something was about to happen. Word about Richard and Natalie's behavior had spread, even to relatives who lived far away. After some small talk, I took a deep breath and stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "I have something important to say," I began. The room grew silent as everyone turned to look at me. I could feel the weight of their eyes, but I knew I couldn't back down. "It's about Richard and his mother, Natalie," I continued, "and how their actions have affected not just me and my son, but the entire family." Richard's face turned pale, and I could see the fear in his eyes. "Kelly, let's not do this here," he said, trying to interrupt. "No," I replied firmly, pulling out my phone. "This isn't just a personal issue." The room stayed quiet, the tension thick, as I prepared to show everyone the evidence I had gathered. It was time for the truth to come out, and for me to take control of my life again. I connected my phone to the Bluetooth speaker, and the room went silent. The recordings began to play. Natalie's cold, controlling voice instructing Richard on how to handle me, and Richard's hesitant responses agreeing with her. It was all there, plain and clear, their plans to fix me. The reaction in the room was immediate. Some people looked shocked, others disgusted. Richard's aunt, who had always been kind to me, looked heartbroken. She turned to Natalie, her voice shaking. "Is this true, Natalie? Were you really forcing Richard to do this?" Natalie's face turned red with anger and fear. "These are taken out of context," she snapped, trying to defend herself. But it was too late. Richard's cousin, who had been quietly watching, stood up. "No, they're not out of context. We've seen signs of this for years, but we didn't want to believe it." That moment changed everything. Family members began to speak up, sharing their own stories of how Natalie had controlled and manipulated them. Slowly, the truth came out, a picture of a woman who had used her role as a caring mother to dominate her family for years. Richard sat silently, his face pale and overwhelmed. For the first time, he seemed to truly see how much control his mother had over his life. As the room filled with heated discussions about Natalie's behavior, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The truth was out. It wasn't just me who saw it anymore. Everyone in the room knew. The family, once under Natalie's control, now had to face the truth about what had been happening for years. The shock was clear on their faces. It was uncomfortable, but it was also necessary. For me, leaving Richard was painful, but I knew it had to be done. There was no going back after everything that had happened. As the family began to leave, I gathered my son, who was blissfully unaware of the storm around him. With one last look at the house that had been both a home and a prison, I stepped into the unknown, knowing it was the right thing for us. Richard stood at the door, watching us leave. His face was filled with sadness and regret. His voice, once so familiar, sounded distant as he whispered a weak goodbye. I didn't look back. Natalie, on the other hand, faced a much harsher reality. The family she had controlled for so long now saw her true colors. They began to pull away, realizing how much harm her actions had caused. Her attempts to regain control were ignored. The evidence from the recordings and the stories shared at the gathering were too much for anyone to overlook. In the weeks that followed, Richard tried to contact me. His messages were full of apologies, promises to change, and pleas for forgiveness. But I couldn't forget the memory of his raised hand or how much his mother had influenced him. The trust between us was broken, and with it, our marriage. I knew this was the end of one chapter and the start of a new one. I wasn't just leaving a bad situation. I was beginning a new life. A life free from control and fear, where I could focus on raising my son in a safe and loving environment. I found a small apartment far away from the neighborhood I used to call home. It was a fresh start, a place where no one knew my story, and I could move forward without the weight of the past holding me back. Teresa, my best friend, stayed by my side through it all. Her support meant the world to me as I worked to create a safe and stable life for my son and myself. My days were simple but meaningful, filled with caring for my son and slowly rebuilding my life. The healing process wasn't easy. It was slow, and some days hurt more than I expected. There were moments when the weight of everything that had happened felt almost unbearable. But the freedom to make my own choices, without fear of being controlled or manipulated, kept me moving forward. It felt like a second chance, a fresh start where I could finally live on my own terms. I started going to therapy, where I learned how to heal from the emotional pain I carried. I also joined support groups for single mothers. Meeting others who had been through similar struggles helped me feel less alone. Over time, the broken pieces of who I used to be began to come back together. I wasn't the same person I was before, but I was stronger and determined to build a better future for me and my son. I wasn't the same person I used to be. I was stronger now, more determined, and I had learned how to protect myself and my son from anything that might hurt us. My son's laughter became my strength, pulling me through even on the hardest days. Watching him grow and reach new milestones brought me so much happiness. Every small moment gave me more hope for the future. As he started walking and talking, I felt my own confidence growing too. I was learning how to be a mom, how to create a safe and loving home, and how to live without fear. Time passed quickly, and before I knew it, a year had gone by. One evening, after putting my son to bed, I sat down in our cozy living room. It was filled with his drawings and toys, clear signs of the happy life we were building together. As I looked around, I couldn't help but think about how far we had come. The pain of the past was still there, like a shadow, but it wasn't as heavy as it used to be. The light of new beginnings shone brighter now, and the support of friends like Teresa and the unconditional love of my son gave me strength. That night, while sipping a cup of tea, I realized I was ready to share my story. I started a blog, a place where I could write about everything I had been through. It wasn't just for me. It was for others who might be going through similar struggles. I wanted to reach out to people dealing with manipulation or abuse and let them know they weren't alone. Each blog post I wrote felt like a step forward. It helped me move away from the person I used to be, a victim, and toward someone who could help others. Over time, I realized I had become an advocate. I had found my voice, and I was using it to speak out against the control and manipulation I had once endured. My story became one of resilience and strength in the face of hardship. As I finish my story, I want to leave you with a question to think about. Do you believe it's possible to completely break free from the control of a manipulative family, or do the effects stay with us forever? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments. Even though you've been unemployed for so long, you still act so arrogant. Get out. Don't think you can keep living in luxury forever. As I lifted my face from the laptop I was working on at the dining table, a sharp pain shot through my neck. Ouch. That's hot. I cried out, turning around. My mother-in-law stood behind me, holding a hair iron. She had been getting ready in the bathroom earlier, and now she was pressing the hot iron against my neck. Humph. So even a freeloader like you can feel heat, she sneered. I was just checking how thick-skinned you are. You do nothing, yet you live such a comfortable life. But I work hard. Why are you treating me like this? I protested. You call that working? Sitting at home and being lazy is not a job. It's time you stopped leeching off us. But the real freeloaders were my husband and mother-in-law. I was the one paying $7,000 in rent, covering all the living expenses and giving them allowances. And yet, I had to endure this cruelty. I had reached my limit. Leave this house immediately, my mother-in-law shouted. Who knows what I might do next? Just to be clear, I said, you really want me to go? Once I leave, I'll never come back. Yes, please go. I never want to care for someone as poor as you again. Her words didn't hurt me anymore. This place never felt like home. Tears mixed with my frustration and the pain in my neck as I packed my things. Without looking back, I left my in-laws' house for good. My name is Laura. I'm 37 years old, and I've been married for 4 years. Even before marriage, I worked from home as a freelance writer. After graduating from college and working at a company, I had to quit and move back to my parent house when my father had an accident. My mother, who had trouble walking, couldn't care for him alone. That's when I started looking for a job I could do from home. I began freelancing with simple internet tasks. As my father got better and I had more free time, I took on more work. I realized I was good at writing and my income kept growing. My articles became popular and I started getting direct job offers. Before I knew it, I was making more money than I did at my old company job. During this time, I went to a reunion with my college friends. "Hey, isn't that Laura? Long time no see," someone called out. That's when I met Larry again, the man who would later become my husband. He was 4 years younger than me in college. Back then, he was always the life of the party, known for making quick decisions and having a fun personality. After graduation, he got a job at a well-known foreign company. We didn't talk much in college, but that day, we had a deep conversation for the first time. Maybe it was because we were so different, but we never ran out of things to say. After meeting a few more times, we naturally started dating. I really love foreign fashion and accessories. My dream is to open a shop that sells only my favorites. I've already started working on it, Larry told me. I enjoyed listening to him. He was smart but still had a childlike excitement when talking about his dreams. Even someone as quiet as me felt inspired just hearing him. So when he proposed, I was truly happy. A big change happened about a year after we got married. My father-in-law passed away suddenly. "Laura, would you mind living with my mom for a while?" my husband asked me. Because of his father's job, his parents had been living in a fancy apartment for years. But after his dad passed, it became hard to afford the high rent. Mom is still struggling to accept what happened. She wants to stay there a little longer, but the lease still has a year left. Could we stay there until then? I understood it was hard for his mom to move right after losing her husband. "Of course, we can't leave her alone," I said. "Don't worry about the rent. Mom and I will cover it. But since it's expensive, could you help with the living costs until my father's inheritance arrives?" "It's fine, no problem. It's a little pricey, but it's only for a year." I wasn't interested in fashion or fancy things, but I was curious about what a luxury apartment looked like. At that time, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I didn't realize how hard it would be to live with my mother-in-law. I had no idea that moving in with her would be the start of my struggles. From the very first time we met, it was clear she didn't like me. When we went to tell her about our marriage, she said, "Of all people, Larry had to choose an older woman. How did you trick him?" She looked down on me, but at that time, my father-in-law stepped in to help. Now that he was gone, there was no one to stop her. The day we moved in, she made her feelings clear. "I still don't accept you as Larry's wife." I wanted to support her, knowing she was grieving, but her words hurt me. My spirit started to break. The next day, the complaints began. "Laura, even if you're staying home, don't dress so lazily. Do you even know where you are? Always be ready for guests. Dress properly." But I'm just wearing jeans. This isn't loungewear. Jeans? That's unacceptable. At least wear a skirt. And always put on makeup before breakfast. I wondered if this was what living a high-class life meant. But I nodded and said, "Yes, I understand." That evening, she continued with her remarks. "Did you buy these ingredients from that store? How can you make such a poor meal with food from there?" "I got them from a high-end supermarket nearby." "I'm sorry, did it not taste good?" "Helen, it's just a simple salad. Larry likes it, so I make it often." "But yes, that supermarket is expensive." She sighed deeply and shook her head. "How embarrassing. Try to act in a way that won't shame our family. You never know who's watching." At that moment, I made a promise to myself. I will do everything I can to gain her approval. I worked hard every day, improving my appearance, my cooking, and my manners. But no matter what I did, she never changed. At first, I tried to ignore her cold words. But over time, they became unbearable. I felt worthless, powerless. I wanted to talk to Larry about it. Before, we spent so much time together and enjoyed our days as a couple. But after moving in, we barely saw each other. "Sorry, I've been really busy with work," he would say, sounding exhausted. Hearing that, I felt like I couldn't complain. but even I had my limits. One day, I finally decided to share my feelings. Larry, I need to talk to you. Oh, actually, I have something to tell you too, he said. I quit my job 4 months ago. What? Quit? What do you mean? Don't worry, I already started something new. Remember the select shop I always wanted to open? I finally launched it. I'm co-managing it with James, my senior from college. What? You never told me about this before. James was well known in our university group. Everyone admired him for his leadership and confidence. He was creative and business savvy. He had successfully developed a game app in college, started a business with friends, and recently found success in web design. There was no doubt he was a great business partner. Larry, speaking in his usual gentle voice but looking a bit guilty, said, I didn't want to worry you or Mom. I'll work harder from now on. Will you support me? His words touched me, but I was unsure. I'll support you, but... Then, Larry made an unexpected request. Thanks. So, about the rent. Can you cover all of it? I was shocked. What? I thought you and your mom were splitting the rent. I can't pay everything by myself, especially since I'm already covering the living costs. Anxiety filled my heart. Larry looked at me sincerely. Please, Laura. This has always been my dream. The business is taking longer than expected to make money, so I need to invest more in advertising. I promise I'll get it on track before we leave here, but I need your help to do that. His passion and determination moved me. I couldn't say no. I could afford the rent with my income, and luckily, we had some savings. More than that, I had chosen to marry him because I believed in his dreams. All right, I understand. But only until the lease ends. Also, I want to know more about your business. Of course. Thank you, Laura. Larry said happily, showing me the website for his shop. I was impressed by how well it was designed. Is there anything I can help with? I offered. But Larry shook his head firmly. No, I want you to focus on your work. And please, don't tell my mom about this. I don't want to worry her unnecessarily. With this new situation, I stopped thinking about my mother-in-law. I truly wanted to support Larry's dream. But over time, my financial burden only grew. I was now paying for everything. Household expenses, my husband's business, and even my mother-in-law's allowance. The only thing I wished for was for the rental contract to end soon. One day, my mother-in-law said, Laura, since you're staying here, you should help more with the housework. Can you take a break from your computer and do some cleaning? I quickly replied, Oh, I'm sorry, Mother. I'll start right away. Finish this quickly. No more excuses. We have guests coming this afternoon. And after you're done cleaning, leave the house. My relationship with my mother-in-law never changed. Ever since I moved in, she made it clear she didn't want me around. Whenever she had guests, I had to leave after cleaning. It was obvious she thought I was a bother. Luckily, since I could work from anywhere with my laptop, I didn't mind too much. But that day, something unexpected happened. When I came home in the evening, my mother-in-law greeted me with an oddly satisfied smile. Welcome back. I cleaned up your room. Confused, I rushed to my office. The room was indeed tidy, but not in a good way. My things had been packed up. In the middle of the room were a large suitcase and 2 duffel bags. What does this mean, Mother? I asked, my heart pounding. This room was meant for guests. I can't let someone like you, who doesn't know how to keep a house properly, use it for free. If you want to stay here, you need to pay rent for this room. If you don't like that, then leave. I stood there, speechless. Why did I have to endure this? As I lowered my head, holding back my frustration, she added with a smirk, I'll say it again. I don't accept you as Larry's wife. Then, she walked off to the living room. Tears welled up in my eyes. I grabbed my phone and called Larry, but he didn't answer. I texted him about what happened and he replied, Please bear with it a little longer. I couldn't take it anymore. When Larry got home late that night, I poured out all my anger. Just hold on a little longer, he said. Work is stressful for me too. Don't worry about my mother. It's just a little more endurance. I'm already paying the full rent, and now she wants me to pay for my room too? This is too much. I snapped. Larry quickly tried to calm me down. I'm really sorry. Once we move out, you won't have to see her again. Please, just put up with it until then. His words eased my anger a little. I won't have to see her again. That thought gave me some relief. The next morning, before leaving, Larry seemed to have a conversation with his mother. We had breakfast together, and for the first time, she didn't make any sarcastic comments. Since my room had been packed up, I decided to work at the dining table. That's when my mother-in-law spoke up. Are you leaving today? I looked up from my computer. Then suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my neck.
Ouch.
That's hot. I screamed and turned around. My mother-in-law stood there with a smirk, holding a hair iron. What are you doing? I shouted. My neck burned with pain. I grabbed it and rushed to the fridge to get a cooling pack. Thinking back, I remembered she had been getting ready in the bathroom earlier. She must have used the hot iron on me on purpose. Oh, so you can feel heat? She sneered. I was just checking how thick-skinned you are. You live such a comfortable life, yet you're completely useless. I work hard too. Why would you do something so cruel? I asked, my voice shaking. Work. Sitting at home and pretending to be busy isn't work. You're just an unemployed freeloader. It's time you started thinking about our situation and became independent. But in reality, was the one paying the rent and covering all the living expenses. Why was the one being treated this way? Before I knew it, I was glaring at her. What's with that look? She snapped. The look of a poor, useless person? I've had enough. Leave this house right now. If you don't, I don't know what I might do next. I took a deep breath and said, Are you sure? Once I leave, I'm never coming back. That's fine with me. I'm tired of taking care of someone like you, she said coldly. Pain and disappointment filled my heart as I packed my things. Since she had already organized my belongings the day before, it didn't take long. I no longer cared about this house or the people in it. Without looking back, I left. After getting treatment at the hospital, I went to my usual cafe to calm down. It was quiet, with spacious tables, perfect for focusing on work. As I sat there, debating whether to call Larry, someone suddenly spoke. Laura? Is that you? I looked up in surprise. It was James, my senior from college. James. Long time no see. How's Larry doing? He asked. Larry is in your care, right? I heard you're his business partner. Sorry I didn't get to greet you earlier. James frowned. Business partner? What do you mean? I only helped design the website because Larry asked me to. I froze. Really? My heart sank. He told me you were co-owners. James looked just as surprised. I also heard you were the one funding the business. My mind raced. So Larry had been lying to me. James continued. Larry rented a separate apartment and worked hard in the beginning, but after a few months, he stopped. He hired others to handle inventory and shipping. And for marketing, he just paid an advertising agency instead of doing anything himself. I felt sick. Everything I believed about Larry was crumbling. At first, I advised Larry to handle things himself, but he refused. That's not a businessman's job, he said. He was too focused on the image of being a business owner, rather than actually running the business. As a result, there was no increase in customers or sales, only growing expenses. And yet, he gave up too soon. According to James, Larry was now heavily involved in online business, spending a lot on consultants. By the way, have you heard about your father-in-law's inheritance? James asked. I shook my head. There was some debt, not as much as expected, but your mother-in-law is managing her share, so they're financially stable. Plus, Larry says that with his wife's good income, even if he fails, they'll be fine. Really? I asked, stunned. But that money is running out too, James continued. He's been living lavishly, acting like a big business owner, and even treating his juniors to expensive meals. I was speechless. So that was why I had to cover my mother-in-law's allowance. They had already spent my father-in-law's inheritance. Larry's constant requests for financial help weren't because of his business struggles. It was because he was running out of money. And he never told me about the inheritance. Maybe that was the reason. Suddenly, everything made sense. James's words connected the missing pieces in my mind. I got up, thanked him, and left the cafe. Before I knew it, I was standing in front of my parents' house. My father looked surprised to see me with my luggage. The moment I saw my parents' faces, all the emotions I had been holding back came rushing out. Tears spilled down my cheeks. "Tell us what happened." "Your mom and I are always on your side," my father said gently. "That's right. You always try too hard on your own," my mother added. Their warm words made me cry even more. Between sobs, I told them everything. The way my mother-in-law had treated me, how I had been paying all the expenses for my in-laws' house, and how Larry had been deceiving me. Both my parents were outraged. My mother cried with me. "You don't need to go back there," my father said firmly. "Live for yourself now." His words hit deep. After letting everything out, I felt lighter, as if a huge burden had been lifted from my heart. What have I been living for all these months? Larry sent me a short message. "Where are you now?" Then more messages followed. After I ignored them, his attempts to contact me stopped completely. It made me realize something. Maybe I had never really mattered to him at all. But instead of sadness, I felt a new sense of determination. That night, I had dinner with my parents. Just sitting with them, sharing a simple meal, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: warmth, comfort, and real family. Maybe what I had been searching for all along was something this simple, true happiness. As I stayed at my parents' house, little by little I began to feel like myself again. About 3 weeks later, Larry called. It was probably because the rent was due. "Laura, where are you? Has everything calmed down with Mom? She feels bad about it. Aren't you coming back soon?" "I'm at my parents' house now, and I plan to stay here. Your mother said she was tired of taking care of a poor person like me, so I'm not coming back. Let's get a divorce." "Wait, why divorce? If the problem is living with Mom, let's fix it. I'll come pick you up. Let's talk in person." "Why should we talk now when you ignored me before? And how's your business?" There was a long silence. Then Larry finally spoke. "Actually, I'm getting advice from someone experienced in business. There might be a big opportunity coming next month." "That's it?" I asked. "Let's just look for a new place to live before making any big decisions," he added quickly. "Don't change the subject. You're not telling me anything important." "That's why I don't want to talk anymore. I'll write up the divorce papers and send them to you." I hung up the phone. But that night, Larry suddenly showed up at my parents' house. I opened the door just enough to talk to him, keeping the chain locked. "Laura, please don't be mad. Let's go back. Mom feels bad about it. Stop sulking." I clenched my fists. "Sulking? Your mother kicked me out of the house." "Don't take it so seriously," he said with a sigh. "Not take it seriously?" My voice shook with anger. "Do you even know why I left? Your mother pressed a hot hair iron against my neck. She burned me. I don't know what else she might do, and there's no way I'm going back." I pulled my hair back, revealing the burn mark. Larry's eyes widened. "Did Mom really do that?" "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because your mother told you it was just a simple fight, right?" Larry looked guilty. "I'm really sorry. Are you okay?" "A simple fight?" My anger boiled over. At first, I wanted to handle the divorce without seeing him. But now, my rage was too strong. I wasn't just angry at my mother-in-law. I was furious at Larry, too. "Anyway, I'm not coming back. You should go home. I'll contact you tomorrow." Larry hesitated. "Really? Will you actually call me? I can't accept a divorce without even discussing it. If you don't contact me, I'll come back tomorrow." With that, he left. I decided to meet Larry and my mother-in-law 4 days later. We arranged to meet in the afternoon at a cafe restaurant on the 40th floor of a luxury hotel. That day, I was ready. I wore an elegant, branded dress that showed my neck and styled my hair up. As soon as my mother-in-law saw me, she looked unhappy. "Thank you for meeting me today," I said with a smile. "I've reserved afternoon tea, so please enjoy it." Larry seemed relieved that I was calm. Soon, tea and small appetizers were served. Before we could start eating, my mother-in-law spoke first. "Laura, I'm truly sorry for what happened last time. I was wrong. Larry scolded me harshly. Will you forgive me? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I quietly continued eating my appetizer. Then, I turned my neck slightly, revealing the burned scar. I'll forgive you, but only after this scar fades. Then, I looked at her and asked, by the way, did you know Larry quit his job? Larry flinched. My mother-in-law turned to him, eyes wide with shock. What? What do you mean he quit? He always says he's busy. He's a hard-working businessman. Larry panicked. Wait, hold on. Businessman? I interrupted, raising an eyebrow. Larry, explain yourself. Did you actually start a business? As his mother questioned him, Larry struggled to come up with excuses. At that moment, the tea stand was brought to our table. I picked up a sweet treat and calmly enjoyed it while watching the chaos unfold. The view from their luxury apartment had been nice, but the view from this 40th floor cafe was just as special. By the way, Larry, I said, taking a sip of tea, what have you been so focused on lately? I heard from James that you quit the select shop. Is that true? Larry's face turned pale. What? How did you? He stammered, looking both surprised and scared. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law grabbed his arm, demanding answers. Larry, what is she talking about? Why would you do that? I sighed and looked directly at him. I know everything. The truth is, you were more obsessed with looking successful than actually running a business, right? You had no real plan, no business skills, and you just recklessly spent all the money your father left behind. My mother-in-law's voice was filled with panic. Wait, Larry, what does she mean? You used up all the inheritance. Her face turned even paler as a terrifying thought crossed her mind. Don't tell me, did you also use my share of the inheritance? I nodded. That's right. Larry spent all of your money too. That's why the household finances are completely drained. Larry's face twisted with desperation. Stop. Don't say any more. Mom, don't worry, I'll fix this. He was frantically trying to control the situation. But his mother looked devastated. Larry, I trusted you. How could you betray me like this? She leaned back in shock, her expression dark with despair. She seemed too stunned to say another word. Meanwhile, I remained calm, pretending not to notice her distress. Helen, actually, I continued. I've been paying for everything in that house. Even the allowance you thought Larry was giving you, it was my money. On top of that, I've been covering Larry's expenses while he's been playing around, pretending to be a businessman. My mother-in-law's face went pale. No, that can't be true. Larry tried to smooth things over. Don't worry, Mom. With Laura's income, we'll manage. His real intentions were clear now. He had just been using me. Don't joke around, I said firmly. I heard you're planning to start another business. We're already at rock bottom, and you're still wasting money and playing around? Stop it now. My words were harsh, but at this point I didn't care. The cafe fell into silence, heavy with tension. I took the last sip of my tea and set the cup down. Then, in a calm but firm voice, I said, I won't support you two anymore. You'll have to pay next week's rent on your own. And as for the divorce, we'll handle everything properly through a lawyer. I stood up, pulled the divorce papers from my bag, and placed them on the table. Larry's eyes filled with tears. Laura, please. I don't want a divorce. Don't do this. But my mind was already made up. My mother-in-law, looking panicked and pale, finally spoke. Wait, Laura. I'm really sorry. I had no idea. Without you, we won't survive. Please help us. We're family. Hearing her say family now was almost laughable. Family? I repeated. Didn't you say before that you never accepted me as part of your family? I pulled out another document. As compensation for the burn you gave me, I expect this payment. I hope you still have that allowance money left. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving them sitting there in shock. Larry remained silent, unable to say anything. Looking up at the towering hotel from the street below, I couldn't help but think, I hope they feel what it's like to fall from luxury to reality. That was the end of my revenge. After that, we got divorced. Larry tried to resist at first, but when I threatened to report his mother to the police for burning me, He quickly gave in. I thought I would never forgive my mother-in-law, but once she disappeared from my life, I no longer cared. As long as they stayed out of my world, that was enough for me. I also demanded a large settlement from Larry for emotional distress. Later, I heard they had moved into a tiny, cramped apartment. Their relationship had become strained. My mother-in-law, who once looked down on me, was now working part-time as a cleaner. Just imagining the scene made me laugh. Larry, now drowning in debt, was working multiple night shifts just to survive. It turned out that being an employee suited him better after all. The confidence and excitement I once admired in him were nothing more than reckless foolishness. Living in luxury and spending his father's inheritance had only exposed his true nature. I continued working while living at my parents' house. Later, I met with James and thanked him for everything. I also told him the full story. He said he appreciated my writing skills, and now he's giving me work. For now, I just want to focus on myself and enjoy life with my parents. After a wonderful week-long honeymoon, I was excited to finally come home. But as I approached the house, I heard strange noises coming from inside. My heart skipped a beat, and fear crept in. What if someone had broken in while we were away? Did you hear that? I whispered to my husband, Nick. What if there's someone inside? Should we call the police? Nick, calm as ever, smiled and said, "It's fine." Without hesitation, he walked to the door, reassuring me with every step. Reluctantly, I followed him, bracing myself for what we might find. To my surprise, it wasn't burglars inside the house. It was my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Relief washed over me when I realized they weren't intruders. They explained they had come to take care of the house while we were away. Nick had given them the key to ensure everything stayed in order. I had assumed they would leave before we got back, but apparently, that wasn't the plan. Trying to be polite, I gently suggested, "It's getting late. Maybe you should head home." Instead, they brushed it off, saying, "Let's take it easy today." Before I knew it, they had taken over the living room and even started using our shower without asking. I thought they might leave the next morning, but when I woke up, they were still there, showing no signs of leaving. By the time I came home from work that evening, they were firmly settled in. I couldn't stand it anymore and asked Nick to tell them to leave. To my shock, his response was, "We're all living together now. If you don't like it, you can leave." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. He was asking me to leave instead of them. Left with no other choice, I packed my essentials into a small carry-on bag and walked out the door. It felt surreal, but I knew I had to stand up for myself. My name is Rachel. I'm 31 years old and work as an editor at a magazine. 4 years ago, I met Nick through a mutual friend. Before him, I hadn't had much experience with relationships. I was drawn to his confident, dependable nature, which was so different from my own. He was the first to say, "I love you," and after 4 years of dating, he proposed. We got married and started building a life together. While planning our wedding and house hunting, Nick seemed so reliable and organized. He made everything feel effortless. But now, as I walked away from the home we were supposed to share, I realized things weren't as perfect as they seemed. This was a turning point I never expected, but I knew I had to take control of my own happiness, even if it meant starting over. Living in our new house with Nick was supposed to be a dream come true, but his mother, Jenna, and his sister, Miriam, quickly became my biggest challenges. Nick's father had passed away about 11 years ago, leaving Jenna and 29-year-old Miriam as his only immediate family. Before we got married, I worried about how well I'd get along with them. We'd had only minimal interactions, and I hoped to maintain a polite but distant relationship. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. After the wedding, Jenna and Miriam began to intrude on my life in ways I hadn't anticipated. Jenna called me nearly every day with complaints or requests. "Can you increase my allowance just a little bit?" she'd ask. "I can't live a decent life with the current amount. Just $300 more would be enough." I always directed her to Nick, reminding her he managed the finances. But she didn't take it well. "You're supposed to take good care of your in-law, or karma will come back to you," she'd scold. She refused to acknowledge my reasoning, blaming me for her financial woes. She also pressured me to visit her more often, help with her chores, and send her favorite foods every month, calling these obligations of a proper daughter-in-law. While Jenna bombarded me over the phone, Miriam had her own way of intruding. She often showed up unannounced, usually when I was cooking dinner. I was in the neighborhood, so I thought I'd drop by, she'd say, making herself comfortable on the sofa. Is dinner ready yet? I'm hungry. Please hurry up. Once she ate, she'd leave without offering to help or even a thank you. I asked her several times to let me know before visiting and not to come so often, but she brushed it off, saying, "Don't mind me. I'm just stopping by. You can feed me whatever's available." It was exhausting to deal with her, but I avoided being too harsh since she was Nick's sister. When I finally told Nick how unhappy I was with their behavior, he spoke to both Jenna and Miriam. Though he warned them, I didn't react too strongly against him, hoping things would improve. 7 months into our marriage, Nick and I finally went on our honeymoon. Work schedules had delayed the trip, but we were thrilled to take a break and explore Europe together. The week-long trip was everything we hoped for, full of adventure, relaxation, and an escape from daily stress. When we returned home, refreshed and ready to settle back into our routine, an unsettling surprise awaited us. As we approached the house, we heard strange noises coming from inside. My heart sank. What could it be? As we approached the house after our trip, I felt uneasy. Strange noises were coming from inside, and my heart started racing. "Did you hear that?" I asked Nick nervously. "What if there's someone in the house? Should we call the police?" Nick, however, didn't seem worried at all. "It's all right," he said calmly, walking toward the door. I followed him hurriedly, bracing for the worst. To my relief, it wasn't a burglar. Instead, it was Jenna and Miriam sitting in our living room. I let out a sigh, thankful they weren't intruders, but my mind quickly filled with questions. Why were they here? "Oh, you're back," Jenna exclaimed. "Did you bring me a souvenir? What about the bracelet I asked for? Did you get it?" I shook my head. "Of course not, it's too expensive." While I stood there, the three of them started chatting cheerfully, completely ignoring me. Finally, I interrupted. "Why are you guys here?" Jenna looked at me, raising an eyebrow. "Are you trying to say our presence is a nuisance? An empty house is an easy target for burglars while you're on vacation. We went out of our way to protect it. You should be grateful." Nick explained that they had offered to take care of the house while we were away, so he gave them a key. When I asked why he didn't tell me, he shrugged. "It was a last-minute thing. I didn't have time to talk to you about it. What was done, so I tried to focus on the silver lining. At least the house hadn't been broken into. But as I looked around, I noticed something alarming. Every room was a complete mess. Miriam's clothes were crammed into the closets, and what didn't fit was piled on the floor. In the living room, there were bags, remote controls, comic books, and random items scattered, not only on the table but all over the floor. The house looked like a storm had blown through it. After a long flight, I was too tired to deal with the mess, but it frustrated me to no end. Still, I hoped they would leave soon. "It's getting dark," I said, trying to hint at their departure. "Shouldn't you go home now?" "Let's take it easy today," Jenna replied casually. To my dismay, they not only stayed but also completely took over the living room. Miriam even decided to take a shower without asking, acting as if this was her home. They made themselves far too comfortable, and I could feel my patience wearing thin. It was clear they had no intention of leaving anytime soon. I assumed Jenna and Miriam would leave the next day, but to my dismay, there was no sign of them leaving. The next morning, they were still there. When I returned home from work that evening, they were comfortably settled in, as if they had no intention of going anywhere. I mustered the courage to tell them it was time to go. "It's time for you to head home," I said as politely as I could. Jenna waved her hand dismissively. "We're family. You don't have to mind us. Just pretend we're not here." Despite their reassurances, I couldn't ignore them. I was the one cooking, cleaning, and doing all the laundry while they lounged around. I felt like a guest in my own home. If I didn't do something, they would stay indefinitely. Determined to resolve the situation, I decided to ask Nick to intervene and get them to leave. While I waited for him to come home, I started cleaning my room. That's when I noticed something alarming. One of my treasured perfumes was missing. It was a limited edition fragrance that was no longer available and had cost over $400. I had been using it sparingly to make it last. Panic set in, and I immediately questioned Jenna about it. She seemed genuinely clueless. "I didn't even know you had perfume," she said. When I turned to Miriam, her response shocked me. "Oh, I have it," she said casually, pulling the bottle out of her bag and handing it to me. The perfume bottle was nearly empty. My careful efforts to conserve it were wasted. "It smells good, doesn't it?" Miriam said with a smirk. "My friend liked it too, so I lent it to her." I stared at her, dumbfounded. There was no sign of remorse or an apology. My frustration boiled over. "Why did you use it without asking me? What you've done is theft. Didn't anyone ever teach you not to take things that aren't yours?" Miriam rolled her eyes. "What the hell? I only borrowed it for a moment. Why are you overreacting? If you just borrowed it, then give me back what you used," I snapped. "Fine," she said with a shrug. "But it's already used, so I'll give you half the money." "I don't want the money back. I want the same perfume replaced," I replied firmly. "You're so mean." "It's just a stupid perfume," Miriam retorted. She pulled out her phone to look up the price. Her eyes widened as she exclaimed, "Holy cow! Why is it so expensive?" Her attitude shifted as she realized the value of the perfume. "Are you crazy for spending $500 on perfume? If it's so important, why didn't you keep it locked up?" "It's valuable to me," I said, trying to stay calm. "That's why I used it sparingly and only inside the house." Miriam's lack of respect and understanding only deepened my frustration. This incident was the final straw, and I knew something had to change. I never imagined I would have a relative who would invade my personal space and use my belongings without permission. Yet here I was facing exactly that. While Miriam and I were arguing about her misuse of my perfume, Nick came home. "What are you two making a fuss about?" he asked, clearly annoyed. Miriam jumped in before I could respond. "Listen, Nick, I only used a little bit of her perfume, and she's calling me a thief." She stomped off to the living room, leaving me frustrated. I pulled Nick into the bedroom to explain what had happened. I poured out my frustrations, telling him how I was at my breaking point. "I can't take this anymore, Nick. I want them out of this house." His response left me stunned. "Don't get so worked up over something so small. And there's something I haven't told you. They're staying here permanently. We're all going to live together." I stood there, mouth agape, trying to process his words. "Why didn't you discuss this with me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Do you own this house?" he snapped back. "I'm paying the mortgage too, you know. Besides, my mom's house is old and falling apart. She's been thinking of moving out or repairing it. Since we have spare rooms, she decided to sell her house and move in. So if you don't like it, you can leave." His words cut deep. Not only had he made this decision without consulting me, but now he was dismissing my feelings entirely. I felt something shift inside me. My love for him was fading fast. "I understand," I said quietly. Without another word, I started packing the bare necessities into my carry-on case. Nick didn't try to stop me. Instead, he muttered, "You're so immature," running away after a fight, before walking out of the bedroom. As I packed, Jenna and Miriam stood by, grinning smugly. Their satisfaction only fueled my determination to leave. I locked the door behind me as I left the house, feeling a strange sense of relief. I had no intention of ever returning. I checked into a hotel and called my boss to request a few days off to get my life in order. During that time, I started looking for an apartment and explained the situation to my parents. When I told them I planned to divorce Nick, they were supportive but concerned, asking what my next steps would be. While I was sorting out my plans, Nick sent me a single text: "When you're ready to apologize, you can come back. Mom and Miriam said they'll forgive you." That text confirmed everything for me. I called him to formally ask for a divorce. At first, he resisted. "You're divorcing me over something like this? You just have to put up with it a little longer," he argued. But as I made it clear that my decision was final, He eventually relented. It was over. The life I thought we'd build together was not what I wanted, and now I was ready to start anew, free from the weight of living in someone else's shadow. I was determined to move on and agreed to the divorce without hesitation. From that point forward, everything proceeded smoothly. The divorce was finalized in 7 months. I wanted to sever ties with Nick as quickly as possible, so we settled the division of property swiftly. I decided to give him the house. After all, we had been married for less than a year, and now we were officially divorced. My friends and coworkers noticed the change in me and were curious about what had happened. At first, I shrugged off their questions, unable to share the details. But as I processed my feelings, I decided to open up about everything. When I told them the full story, their reactions were a mix of shock and sympathy. "That's unbelievable," they said. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Their support and understanding made me feel lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. After I started living alone, I threw myself into my work like never before. With fewer household responsibilities, I took on 4 times as many projects and even helped my overwhelmed colleagues. My boss expressed concern about my sudden increase in workload, but I reassured them I was fine. The truth was, when I was alone, the painful memories of my past kept resurfacing. I began blaming myself for everything that had happened. Work became my escape, a way to drown out those thoughts and focus on something productive. One day, about 6 months after the divorce, Nick called me unexpectedly. I had left most of my belongings behind when I moved out, so I assumed the call was about those items. Initially, he made small talk, asking what I was doing and if I was living alone. His tone was hesitant, which was unusual for him. Nick was typically straightforward and impatient, often getting cranky if someone took too long to get to the point. Growing tired of the conversation, I asked bluntly, "What do you want?" After a pause, he said, "I want us to get back together." I felt no hesitation in my response. "No," I replied firmly and moved to hang up the phone. "Wait," he exclaimed, sounding desperate. "There's something I haven't told you yet." "What is it?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. "I'm busy, so make it quick." He hesitated for a moment before finally admitting, "Can you lend me some money? I'm struggling to pay the mortgage. It used to be covered by both of us, and now—" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything, he had the audacity to ask me for help with a house I had willingly given up just to be free of him. His request only solidified my resolve to keep moving forward and never look back. "I'm sorry," I said, "but that's not my responsibility anymore." And with that, I ended the call, ready to continue building the life I deserved. I understood that it must have been difficult for Nick to manage the financial burden alone. However, I also knew the amount he was struggling with wasn't insurmountable. He explained that he had been expecting a raise a few months ago, but it never materialized. To make matters worse, his performance reviews indicated there was no chance of a raise in the future. Frustrated, he decided to look for a new job, hoping to find one with better pay and conditions. Unfortunately, the reality was far from what he had imagined. The only opportunities available offered lower salaries, and he hadn't managed to secure a new position yet. Regardless of his reasons, I had no intention of lending him money. "Don't call me anymore," I told him firmly. His response was condescending. "You're still single, right? No one's going to want a not-so-young divorcee. You'd better come back to me." "No, thank you," I replied curtly before hanging up. After the call, I couldn't help but reflect on my past decisions. I wondered why I had ever fallen in love with Nick or agreed to marry him. I felt deeply disappointed in my own judgment. Not long after, both Nick and his family, Jenna and Miriam, began harassing me. Through my interactions with them, I discovered their misconceptions. They had assumed Nick was earning a substantial income because we had purchased a new house and had a grand wedding. When their allowances weren't increased, they blamed me, believing I was preventing Nick from giving them more money. They were initially thrilled when I left, thinking they could live comfortably without me. But reality soon hit them when they realized Nick's salary was much lower than they had anticipated. When the life they had envisioned started slipping away, they panicked and began calling me repeatedly. They seemed to believe that men always earned more than women, but the truth was that my salary had been higher than Nick's all along. Although I wanted to block them all, Nick knew where I worked, and I fear he might call, or even show up at my office. So, I reluctantly answered his calls on occasion. During these calls, Nick often complained about Jenna and Miriam's excessive spending. He admitted he had run out of savings and that his family had been forced to take on part-time jobs. However, their spending habits meant they could never make ends meet. His calls always revolved around money. I decided that if I told him I was also struggling financially, he might stop bothering me. One day, as usual, Nick called to say, "I need a loan. I don't have enough to pay the mortgage this month." This time, I responded differently. "Actually, I'm going to resign from my job soon. I've already spent most of my savings," I said, hoping it would put an end to his constant demands. Nick's voice was tense on the phone. "I want you to lend me some money. If you think I'm lying, you can ask someone at work." I had no intention of lending him anything. Hearing my firm refusal, Nick simply said, "I see," and hung up. That was the last time he called me. Later, when I shared this with a friend, she revealed that Nick's situation was much worse than I had known. He had managed to secure a new job, but it paid significantly less. Most of his income was eaten up by the mortgage, leaving him struggling to make ends meet. On top of that, Miriam's personal life had spiraled into chaos. She had an affair with the manager of her part-time job, which led to a massive scandal. The manager's wife discovered the affair and filed a civil claim against Miriam. Initially, Miriam claimed she didn't know the manager was married, but text messages revealed otherwise. She had even known his wife was pregnant and had pursued him regardless. The fallout was severe. The manager divorced his wife, and Miriam was ordered to pay a hefty compensation. Her friends distanced themselves, and she lost both her job and social circle. Meanwhile, Nick's family was burdened not only with the mortgage, but also with the debt stemming from Miriam's lawsuit. Their lives revolved around repaying debts with no end in sight. Jenna, too, was frustrated, lamenting to anyone who would listen that her peers had grandchildren while her children were still single and struggling financially. Nick confided in one of our mutual friends, complaining about daily arguments at home. He often whined about being single and claimed women no longer noticed him. His stress had taken a visible toll. He looked disheveled, had lost weight, and appeared older than his age. "What woman would want him now?" my friend remarked, rolling her eyes. This friend, who had introduced Nick and me, felt somewhat responsible for the outcome. While she found his ongoing dramas entertaining in a strange way, she stayed in touch with him partly to ensure he didn't try to reach out to me. As for me, my life had taken a positive turn. I had recently launched a web magazine with a university friend. Leaving my previous job, I invested most of my savings into building the startup. It was a small venture, and I had to handle many tasks on my own, but I found joy in taking on new challenges. The obstacles I had faced in the past gave me the strength to manage difficulties with confidence. I was also in a new relationship with someone I had met at work. He respected my feelings and gave me the space I needed. Through him, I realized that Nick hadn't been the decisive leader I once thought he was. He had simply been selfish. For months after my divorce, I believed I would never find happiness in love again. But now, I've embraced a positive outlook and am focused on cherishing the happiness I've found in my new life and relationship. The last thing I expected to hear as I stood outside my home was the screech of tires on the asphalt. In an instant, my world flipped upside down, and I found myself lying on the ground, groceries scattered everywhere, my body screaming in pain. I had been hit by a car. As I tried to make sense of what had just happened, I was horrified to realize that the driver was none other than my mother-in-law, Lauren. Later, lying in the hospital bed, trying to manage the pain, the phone rang. It was my husband, Jeremy, sounding frantic. "Rachel, you need to tell the police you just fell. Someone's saying they saw Mom hit you with a car. Can you believe it?" His words hit harder than the impact of the car itself. Not only had Lauren run me over, but now Jeremy and his parents were trying to cover it up. As I listened to his desperate rambling, My mind drifted back to the early days of our relationship. When we first met at the office, where Jeremy was assigned to be my mentor, he wasn't exactly charming. But over time, his steady presence won me over. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, but it felt solid. After we got married, things changed quickly. I left my job and moved into his parents' home, a decision I regretted almost immediately. Living with Lauren and her husband, Noah, turned out to be a daily battle. Lauren, with her sharp tongue and relentless criticism, made sure to remind me of my role as a wife and homemaker. "You should be grateful to Jeremy," she would say, her voice dripping with superiority. "You're living a comfortable life because of him." Noah wasn't as vocal, but his outdated views on women were equally demeaning. Every day was a reminder of how much I didn't belong. My marriage to Jeremy began to crumble. He took his parents' side more often than not, dismissing my concerns with a wave of his hand. "They're old. You need to be more understanding," he would say, brushing off my feelings. As time went on, the distance between us grew. Our dreams of having children slowly faded, and the pressure from Lauren and Noah to produce grandchildren became unbearable. Yet Jeremy remained attached, lost in his own world, indifferent to both our struggles and the demands of his parents. During those difficult times, my only comfort came from my neighbor, Cheryl, and her husband, Tyler. Cheryl had been through her own battles and became my confidant and a source of strength. She knew the truth behind the facade of my marriage. Behind the perfect image, there was a crumbling relationship, and Cheryl helped me hold on during those tough times. As I lay in the hospital bed, Jeremy's voice snapped me back to the present. "Rachel, you need to do this for us, for the family," he begged. But something inside me had changed. I couldn't continue being the submissive wife, always bending to their will. I had been hit both literally and figuratively by the weight of their twisted family dynamics. And now I realized I could no longer be their victim. I hung up the phone, a new sense of determination building inside me. They had crossed a line, and it was time for them to face the consequences. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about standing up against the unfairness that had controlled my life for too long. Lying there in the calm, sterile hospital room, my thoughts were anything but peaceful. My body ached from the injuries, but the deeper pain came from the betrayal of the people I once called family. The sunlight streamed through the window, casting long shadows across the room as Cheryl, my neighbor and friend, walked in. Her face was filled with concern. "Rachel, how are you feeling?" she asked gently, sitting beside my bed. Her voice was soft, but I could see the anger in her eyes. "I've been better," I said, trying to force a smile. "What did the police say?" Cheryl's expression grew serious. "At first, they believed the story about your fall. But I told them what I saw Lauren driving out of the garage like she was in a race, right before I found you on the ground." I clenched my fists, feeling a wave of anger wash over me. "Jeremy wants me to lie to protect them." Cheryl reached out and squeezed my hand. "You can't let them get away with this, Rachel. It's not just about the accident, it's about everything. The years of manipulation, the control. This is your chance to break free." Her words hit me hard. For years, I had endured Lauren's cutting remarks, Noah's dismissive attitude, and Jeremy's constant siding with them. I had lived under the weight of their control, always trying to keep the peace, always bending to their will. It was a never-ending cycle of humiliation and frustration. But now, something had shifted in me. As Cheryl and I talked, a plan started to take shape in my mind, a plan not just for justice, but for retribution. It was time for Lauren and her family to face the consequences of their actions. The next day, a police officer came to take my statement. I told him everything, from the moment Lauren hit me to Jeremy's desperate attempt to cover it up. As I spoke, I felt the weight of years of suffering lifting off my shoulders. The officer listened closely, taking notes as I described the betrayal I had endured. When I finished, he looked at me and said, "We have enough to bring them in for questioning. We'll need to investigate further, but your testimony is crucial." I nodded, feeling a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just a legal process, it was the first step toward reclaiming my life. As the days passed, my determination only grew stronger. Cheryl visited me regularly, keeping me updated on the investigation's progress. She told me that the community was rallying around me, offering support and expressing outrage at what had happened. I was touched by their kindness. I had felt so alone for so long, but now I realized I wasn't fighting this battle on my own. I also learned that Tyler, Cheryl's husband, had been reviewing footage from their home security camera, which was aimed toward our driveway. He thought it might have captured something useful. The idea that we might have proof that Lauren intentionally hit me sparked a glimmer of hope inside me. If we could prove it, it would be the undeniable evidence we needed to hold her accountable. With each passing day, my body grew stronger. But more than that, I felt a deep sense of healing from within. This wasn't just about recovering from the physical injuries, it was about reclaiming my power, my voice, and my life. I had spent too long living in the shadow of their control, but now, for the first time in years, I felt free. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready. I had spent enough time being silent, enduring their manipulations. Now, it was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. And for me, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would no longer be the victim of their twisted family dynamics. I was ready to stand up for myself and, finally, take back control of my life. I was no longer the quiet, defeated woman suffering in silence. I had been wronged, and now I was ready to fight back, to expose the twisted truth behind those who had oppressed me for so long. As I sat in the small, cold room at the police station, waiting for the Atom, my hands trembled not from fear, but from a mix of anger and anticipation. The door finally opened, and Adam Brody entered, his expression serious, holding a file in his hand. "We've reviewed the footage from your neighbor's security camera," he said, placing the file on the table in front of me. "It clearly shows Lauren's car hitting you. There's no doubt it's unmistakable." A wave of relief washed over me. The truth was out, and it was undeniable. But that relief quickly gave way to something stronger, a burning desire for justice. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice steady, but filled with determination. "We're bringing them in for questioning today," Adam Brody replied. "Your husband too. They'll all have to answer for this." As I left the police station, my mind raced with thoughts. It wasn't enough for them to simply be questioned or exposed. They needed to face the full consequences of their actions. I had been their victim for too long now. They had to feel the weight of what they had done. Later that day, Cheryl called with an update. The police took Lauren, Noah, and Jeremy in for questioning. "The whole neighborhood is talking about it. People can't believe what Lauren did." The news had spread quickly, sparking a wave of shock and disgust from those who had once held the family in high regard. But for me, it was a moment of vindication. The years of silent suffering were over, and the truth was finally out. That night, as I lay in my hospital bed, I imagined Lauren's face as she was confronted with her actions. The once powerful, domineering woman would now be forced to face the consequences of her lies and deceit. It was a scene I had played out in my mind many times before, each time giving me a small sense of victory. But it wasn't just Lauren who needed to be held accountable. Jeremy's betrayal had cut just as deeply. He had chosen to protect his parents instead of standing by me, his wife. He had chosen their lies over truth and decency. Now he needed to understand the full gravity of his choice. A few days later, I was discharged from the hospital. My body still ached, but my spirit remained unbroken. Cheryl and Tyler were there to greet me, their faces filled with concern and determination. "Rachel, we're with you in this, no matter what," Tyler said, his voice strong and reassuring. "Thank you," I replied, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I had support, and I had the strength to face whatever was coming next. That evening, I sat in Cheryl's living room, watching the news. The story of my accident and the ongoing investigation had made the local headlines. Lauren, Noah, and Jeremy's faces flashed across the screen, their reputations in tatters. The family that had once been admired was now the subject of scandal and outrage. It felt surreal, seeing it all play out on the news. For so long, I had been the one suffering in the shadows, enduring their cruelty without anyone knowing. Now, The truth was out for everyone to see. And as I watched their downfall unfold, I realized this was only the beginning. They had to answer for what they did, not just to me, but to everyone they had deceived. And this time, I wasn't going to back down. As I sat there with Cheryl and Tyler, I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But I was no longer the silent sufferer. I was ready to take my life back, to stand up for myself, and to make sure they felt the full weight of their actions. And with each step I took, I grew stronger, more determined, and more certain that I was finally reclaiming my power. My private pain had turned into a public spectacle, but I didn't feel any sympathy for them. This was the beginning of their downfall, a downfall they had brought upon themselves. The tension in the interrogation room was thick as I sat across from Lauren, Noah, and Jeremy. Their faces were a mix of fear, anger, and disbelief. Adam Brody sat next to me, his presence a comforting reminder that justice was finally at work. "You understand why you're here," Adam Brody began, looking directly at them. "The evidence is clear, Lauren. You hit Rachel with your car and fled the scene. Noah, you were a witness and chose to remain silent. And Jeremy, you tried to cover it all up." Lauren's face was tight with defiance, but there was a flicker of fear in her eyes. "It was an accident," she said, her voice shaky. "I never meant to hit her." Noah kept his gaze glued to the table, saying nothing, while Jeremy's face flushed with guilt and embarrassment. He looked at his mother, his voice cracking as he finally spoke. "Mom, why didn't you stop? Why did you run?" The reality of the situation seemed to finally be sinking in for him. I sat there, looking at all three of them, my heart hardened by years of mistreatment. "You could have killed me, Lauren. And all you cared about was saving yourselves." That was when Lauren's composure broke. Tears streamed down her face as she sobbed. I was scared. I panicked. For the first time, Noah spoke, his voice low and filled with regret. "We were wrong. We should never have lied." Adam Brody turned to Jeremy. "And you, Jeremy, you tried to twist the story, even asking your wife to lie for you. How do you justify that?" Jeremy's response was barely above a whisper. "I don't know. I wanted to protect my parents." A surge of disgust rose within me. Jeremy had chosen his parents over the truth, over me. "You didn't just betray me, Jeremy," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "You betrayed everything we ever had." Adam Brody nodded, his expression grim. "You will all face charges for your actions. This is a serious matter." As we left the interrogation room, a wave of closure washed over me. They had been exposed for who they truly were. Lauren, once so dominant and controlling, now stood as a coward, hiding behind her tears. Noah, who had always stayed silent, had revealed himself as an accomplice to his wife's crime. And Jeremy, blinded by loyalty to his parents, had lost sight of everything right and true. When I stepped out of the police station, the world outside felt different. The air seemed fresher, the sky more open. I had finally confronted the people who had held me down for so long, and now I was free to start building my future. Cheryl and Tyler were waiting for me, their faces full of concern and pride. "You were incredible in there," Cheryl said, her voice warm and supportive. "Thank you," I replied, feeling a sense of relief and strength I hadn't known in years. This wasn't just about getting justice for the accident, it was about freeing myself from the chains of the past. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. The weight of Lauren, Jeremy, and Noah's control had finally been lifted, and now I was ready to live my life on my own terms. I thanked Cheryl and Tyler, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude for their constant support. In the weeks that followed, the legal proceedings against Lauren, Noah, and Jeremy began. The news of their arraignment spread throughout the community, stirring up various reactions. Some people were shocked, while others expressed disappointment. But for me, it was a validation of the long struggle I had endured in silence. During this difficult time, I stayed with Cheryl and Tyler. They didn't just give me a place to stay, they provided a warm and nurturing environment, a space where I could begin to heal. Their kindness was a sharp contrast to the years of cold indifference I had experienced while living with Jeremy and his parents. One evening, As we sat in Cheryl's cozy living room, Tyler shared some important news. "The prosecutor's office called," he said. "Lauren and Noah are facing serious charges. Jeremy, too, for his role in the cover-up." I nodded, feeling a bittersweet sense of satisfaction. They were finally facing the consequences of their actions. But then Cheryl looked at me, with concern in her eyes. "What about you, Rachel?" she asked softly. "What are you going to do now?" I took a deep breath, a sense of clarity washing over me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. "I'm filing for divorce," I said firmly. "I can't stay with someone who chose his parents over me, even in such a serious situation." Cheryl squeezed my hand, her silent support speaking volumes. She didn't need to say anything. I knew she understood. The divorce process moved quickly, mainly because of Jeremy's guilt and the overwhelming evidence against him. I received a significant settlement, which was a small consolation for the years of emotional pain I had suffered. With that money, I decided to start over. I rented a modest apartment, nothing fancy, but it was mine. It was a fresh start, a place where I could rebuild my life on my own terms, without the shadow of Jeremy or his family hanging over me. Cheryl and Tyler were instrumental in helping me begin this new chapter of my life. Tyler, who owned a small business, offered me a job. "You've got the skills and experience, Rachel. We'd be lucky to have you," he said, his offer genuine and full of warmth. I accepted eagerly, ready to regain my independence and re-enter a world I had been shut out of for far too long. As I settled into my new job, I began to find a sense of peace and purpose that had been missing from my life for years. Working alongside Cheryl and Tyler, I rediscovered parts of myself that I had long forgotten. I was no longer just Jeremy's wife, downtrodden and overlooked. I was Rachel, a woman with her own strength, identity, and a future that was finally in my control. Months passed, and the day of the trial's verdict finally arrived. Sitting in the courtroom, I felt a mixture of emotions: nervousness, relief, and a quiet sense of triumph. It had been a long road, full of pain and heartache, but I had made it through. Now, as I waited for the judge to deliver the final verdict, I realized that this moment was about more than just the outcome of the trial. It was about reclaiming my life, about standing up for myself after years of being silenced. Whatever the decision, I knew one thing for certain: I was no longer the victim of their lies and control. I was free. I felt a sense of closure as I sat in the courtroom, watching Lauren, Noah, and Jeremy seated across from me. Their faces were etched with anxiety and regret. The judge's voice echoed through the solemn room as he delivered the verdict. "In light of the evidence presented, this court finds Lauren and Noah Gill guilty of hit and run and obstruction of justice. Jeremy Gill is found guilty of aiding in the cover-up." The courtroom buzzed with whispers as the sentences were announced. Lauren and Noah were sentenced to prison, while Jeremy received community service and probation. I watched as their faces crumbled, the reality of their fate sinking in. This was the moment they had to face the consequences of their actions. After the verdict, I stepped outside the courthouse, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. Cheryl and Tyler joined me, their presence a comforting reminder of the support that had carried me through this entire ordeal. "Justice has been served," Cheryl said softly, her voice filled with relief. "Yes, but at what cost?" I replied, thinking of all the years lost and the pain I had endured. The news of the sentencing spread quickly. Lauren, once a respected member of our community, was now a convicted felon. Noah, her silent accomplice, shared her fate. And Jeremy, the man I had once loved, had become someone who betrayed his own wife to protect his deceitful parents. In the weeks following the trial, I felt a change within myself. The heavy weight of the past began to lift, replaced by a growing sense of empowerment. For so long, my life had been controlled by Lauren and Jeremy, but now it was mine to shape. Working at Tyler's company brought me new challenges, and I thrived in the supportive environment. My confidence grew with each day, and Cheryl was by my side, encouraging me to embrace this new chapter in my life. The biggest surprise came when I least expected it. At a company event, I met Frank, one of Tyler's colleagues. He was kind, respectful, and saw me for who I truly was, not for my past. Our friendship grew, and before long, it blossomed into a romance. Within a year, we were married in a simple ceremony, a celebration of new beginnings and healing. Frank knew about my past, about the pain, betrayal, and heartbreak, but that only made our bond stronger. As I stood beside him on our wedding day, looking into his loving eyes, I realized what a true partnership looked like. It was built on mutual respect, trust, and understanding everything my marriage to Jeremy had lacked. A year passed since the trial, and life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. Frank and I had moved into a cozy house, a place we could truly call our own. The scars of my past, with Lauren, Noah, and Jeremy, had begun to fade, replaced by the love and contentment that now filled my days. One evening, as Frank and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky, he turned to me with a gentle smile. "You know, Rachel, I admire your strength. What you went through, it's unimaginable. But here you are, stronger and happier." His words touched me deeply. I smiled back, feeling grateful for the journey that had brought me to this moment. The struggles I had faced were real and painful, but they had also shaped me into the person I was now, stronger, wiser, and finally at peace. As I looked out at the horizon, I knew that my life had truly begun anew, filled with love, hope, and the promise of a brighter future. I leaned against Frank, feeling the warmth of his embrace. "I couldn't have made it without friends like Cheryl and Tyler, and without you," I said, my heart filled with gratitude. We started talking about the future, about dreams and plans that were yet to unfold. The pain and drama of the past no longer held me back. Instead, they were stepping stones that led me to this moment of peace. From time to time, I heard updates about Lauren, Noah, and Jeremy. Lauren and Noah were serving their prison sentences, living with the consequences of their actions every day. Jeremy, on the other hand, struggled to rebuild his life. His betrayal had isolated him, and the community's knowledge of what he had done left him filled with regret. Although I had moved on, there was a small part of me that felt a bitter satisfaction in seeing them face the results of their choices. They had finally reaped what they had sown, a fitting outcome for their behavior. As I looked back on my journey, I realized it was one of change. I had gone from being a victim of manipulation and lies to someone who stood up for herself, fought for justice, and reclaimed her life. Now, surrounded by love and support, I was ready to face whatever the future brought. The challenges and heartaches of my past had shaped me, but they no longer defined who I was. I was Rachel, a survivor, a woman who found her happiness despite everything that happened. The story of my past would always be a part of me, but it was the story of my present and future that excited me the most. It was a story of love, strength, and new joy.